Welcome to the Yoked Podcast, where we talk about all things entrepreneurship, real estate, and partnerships. I'm your host, Travis Hall, alongside my co-host and wife, Ingrid. Together, we've been in real estate for nearly 2 decades, always as an equally yoked husband and wife team.
Join us each week as we bring you a new episode. And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, follow along, and welcome to this week's episode of
The Yoked Podcast. What's up, and welcome to the Yoked Podcast.
Hi.
What's up, babe?
What's up?
How are you?
I'm great. Kids homesick today.
Yep.
We're great.
Technology has not been working for us. Why would it? But here we are. We're doing it. This is our first series that we're doing. We're excited about. So kind of like a backed by popular demand sort of thing is that we get asked a lot about a lot of things, but this first series we get asked about a lot, and that is short-term rentals.
Yes.
And so it's your kind of brainchild of like, hey, let's just do a series on it and talk specifically in multiple episodes about short-term rentals. So this one's kind of just our intro episode. We're kind of high level. You and me, you have a fun guest coming on for the next episode, I think.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get another guest that I know through our community that just crushes it in the short-term rental space for our third guest. Or our third episode. So let's start this off. I'll let you take it. Beginning about talking about short terms in general and what they are and all the things.
For sure. So I think we get asked a lot, like, what about short-term rentals? And so short-term rentals for the audience is anything under 30 days booking. So once you get to 31 and above, you get into midterm and long-term rentals. Obviously, most short-term rentals are going to be in desirable areas. We'll talk a lot about location today. But basically, we set out to do short-term rentals as just like an added value to our portfolio. There's lots of different reasons you would do one. And so we can talk about that. But honestly, like when people say, so how did you choose where to do a short-term rental? For us, it was where we wanted to visit.
It was taking advantage of a second home mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean, was the initial idea. I mean, and the quick story, our first ever attempt at a short-term rental wasn't where we got it. If you remember back, our first attempt, it was the vision of a short-term rental, I should say. It was during COVID.
Yeah.
And it was a 35-acre chunk of land along the Dolores River, and it had camper hookups, and it had this small little like tiny home on it, and it was amazing. I'm like kind of glad that we didn't get it because it was 3 hours away from
I'm also like, you can rent anything,
but we put an offer on it.
Yeah, we did.
So anyway, that's where it started.
Beat out.
All right, let's talk about our actual first one, and we talk about why we did it. I think number one, the number one reason is because people want a place that they own and a place that they like, like a vacation home, and that's where it starts. I feel like most of the time it's like, hey, we love this place. We come here often. We even rent Airbnbs. Let's buy one. But the other reason I think that is often overlooked from the general consumer, but is not overlooked as an investor, is the tax benefits, potential tax benefits as of this recording.
And so unpack that, because like the difference between in tax benefits of a short-term rental versus a long-term rental.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, that is a super detailed podcast by itself. But in high level, with the short-term rental, there is this thing called a short-term rental loophole, is what we call it in the tax world. And essentially, you can depreciate the active income that you receive because it's active income. It's not passive. So they classify, the IRS classifies the short-term rental income as active. And so you can write off all of the active income against a W-2 as long as you are. There's so many rules that you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But where a normal rental, it's just passive losses. And so you don't really get to offset that against your active income unless you're a real estate professional like we are.
Sure.
A tax certified, it's the classification. But in the short-term world, you can skirt that real estate professional status and still get the huge benefit. And so a lot of people do this style of investing because they can offset a large amount of active income through the W-2.
Yeah. And then I would say just like another added benefit of being in the short-term space is specifically for like our own vacationing habits. The kids got to an age where we're like, we don't want to stay in a hotel. We can't. Like, you're completely hostage to your room come 8 p.m. or any time that they nap. And so we really liked that style of vacationing and spending time together. And we knew that we could create a space for other families to enjoy it as well. So
Yeah.
it's just
Well, and it does scratch the itch for a lot of people of hospitality.
Yeah.
And it's fun. It can be fun
Yes.
to host people's vacations. Like it can.
Yeah.
Depending on what type of Airbnb you get or what type of short term, but as a general statement. All right, let's talk about our first one.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways, obviously, to acquire a property for short-term rental. We highly recommend you log on to AirDNA. There's some other platforms that you can use to evaluate short-term rentals.
Right.
And
that is not this episode. We're not talking about underwriting and all that stuff.
You could do, just its own episode.
Totally.
But specifically, like, how did we finance some of those properties? So somebody finds a property, it's somewhere they vacation, they're like, okay, we're ready to do this. Like, how do we actually go out and get the funds to purchase it? And so we've done it all different ways.
We have.
Talk about Deer Trail, because that's probably the most intricate.
So Deer Trail was our first one that we purchased, and we bought it in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So after we failed at buying the land, we partnered with our good friends Dave and Hannah. And it was kind of more off the cuff. They didn't know that we had, looked at that land and submitted an offer, but I think it was in like a month. Like Dave randomly texted and he's like, "Hey,
look at this
cabin. Wouldn't that be fun to partner and buy this Airbnb?" And we were like, "Yes, let's do it." And so we did structure this one a little bit different because it was 2020. And so it was a really hot market. It was kind of post initial like freak out where the market shut down. And it was, interest rates were super cheap and super low and very, very, very much a seller's market. So we go and look at this cabin, and we actually purchased this cabin with cash, utilizing our personal HELOC, our home equity line of credit. And the reason is that, first of all, we could get the property. But this one was fun because we purchased it cash and we wrapped in everything, meaning we bought ATVs included in the sale. And we like, hey, here's our cash offer, but we also want the ATVs included. We want the furnishings included, which is a common thing in Airbnb. We want Eli the elk included. And the firewood, splitter, all the things. It was like everything's included. And so we bought it cash, utilizing our HELOC. We knew we needed to do some updates. And so our plan was, and this is what we executed, we did some basic updates. We lifted the property just to make, it had like really old carpet and some
countertop.
some less than $10,000 of updates. And we updated it, got it ready for Airbnb, and then we refinanced it into a conventional second home note.
Doing a cash out refi.
So we essentially did what's called the BRRRR method that we have talked about on this podcast, but we did a cash out refi, and it didn't work exactly like we planned. The appraisal didn't come up as high, but we ended up having to put, I think, all in, we split a 8% down payment at the end of the day. And so, but that's how we did it. Cash first, refinance into a mortgage.
Now, the other two, we've done different ways, obviously financing them, but I think one of the common threads is that we've had partners in all of our short-term rentals. And there's a lot of reasons that partners can be very helpful for short-term rentals. Specifically, I mean, obviously seasonality, and we can talk about that. Like, what does 2025 market landscape look like for short-term rentals? But also, it's really nice to have people to bounce ideas off of and also absorb some of those changing markets. So both our Florida condo and our cabin in Grand Lake are also owned in partnerships, and those were done a myriad of different ways. But the Grand Lake one, our partners, so Lindsay and Ryan, it's my sister and her husband, they sold a condo in Boulder and 1031 that money in as part of the portion of the down payment. And so I think that's what shows the audience is like, you can get really creative on this. Like, a lot of people choose to turn their primary into a short-term rental. That's great. But there's lots of different ways, using HELOCs and cash out refis, loans, 1031s, many, many different ways that you can structure financing your first STR.
Well, and for financing an STR, like for financing a vacation home, some lenders and banks like specialize in that. They have like think about Shelby, Park Hill. They do a lot of vacation home lending. It's kind of like one of their things. And so while especially in the investment and the vacation home world, in the mortgage, like they're not all created equal. Some of them, like they have great incentives and great rates for second homes.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about some of the learning curves. People are like,
learning curves.
how do we actually do this? Let's talk about pricing, cleaners.
All you do is you just buy it, you put it on the market, and then it covers itself.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do.
So we use a platform called Hospitable, and it's really nice because you can manage multiple rentals on it. And so it streamlines a lot of the communication. And I think there's other rental platforms that do something like this, but it integrates calendars.
It's called a channel manager.
Yes, tech world. But
and it manages, we have ours listed on vrbo and, booking.com and Airbnb.
Syncs your calendar.
And it syncs the calendar across all of those.
Yeah, which is really nice. Let's talk just briefly about vendors and cleaners, because a lot of these are being done remotely for people.
Because you live and die by that.
I live and die by
you do. I mean, it's very true.
Yeah. And honestly, like this is it's a good example of like that same cabin that we had. We had this great cleaner, extremely dependable, never missed a cleaning.
So dependable.
Would do same day cleanings for us. Quality of cleanliness, not great. But we were in a market where it was really slim pickings for our vendors. And that was the biggest challenge by far for that first one.
Small town in Colorado, and there was, like 2,000 people in the town.
We're like, well, we need a cleaner and we need someone to do the hot tub. And honestly, we could have used a couple more like kind of handyman people, but it was close enough that we filled that gap ourselves. Up in Grand Lake, I mean, obviously having a handyman has been extremely helpful. Someone to mow the lawn, someone to plow.
Right. Well, Grand Lake is interesting because it's not that far away from Fairplay, which is where the Deer Trail property was. But the towns are so different. Grand Lake is set up in a town it is a resort, it is tourism. And so there is a lot of vendors, even though the town itself is not that big.
Yeah. And so that I think was one of our biggest learning curves, is that access to vendors and reliability of them, like you've really got to think about. And it really has to be somewhere that you've got to be willing to, pretty much bend to whatever's convenient for them in the market that you're in.
It's so true. And in Florida, like there's people everywhere. Like where our condo is, like there is so many vendors to choose from. Like it's not even a conversation that we have to have.
But that's more where like the learning curve of regulations would come into play.
Absolutely.
We're in a highly saturated market in Florida. So, short-term rental laws are extremely friendly. It's for sure a destination place. All of those hurdles, like there were none, right? Getting approved, like anything like that. Absolutely. However, if it's really saturated, it takes a long time for you to build up as a host and as a property, enough reviews so that you're being lifted to the top of the algorithm.
Yep, that's so true.
Yeah.
Well, and you spoke about regulation. That is one big learning curve. And that's changed a lot since 2020, since we got our first one. The regulation piece, a lot of cities are heavily regulated, and that's where this strategy investing does not fit everywhere, because some cities just don't allow you to do it.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about exit strategies, because we've exited one of our short-term rentals, and then we also have pivoted the way that we're managing another. And so, the market slowed down greatly for short-term rentals, and we were on the front end of that, fortunately, for the Deer Trail one. And so we rented it out for a 6-month stint. And then at the end of that, we ended up selling it to our renter because he loved it. And it was amazing.
And it was at a spot in our partnership where we were all like, hey, we could redo this, or are we all good? Yeah. And so we just kind of played the game.
But I would encourage people who are looking for a short-term rental, don't pigeonhole yourself into one exit strategy.
Yep.
Have a couple of options, because the market is pretty up and down and volatile right now for short terms.
It's very, very much. And the demand has gone down.
Yes.
Because, a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon because it looked like fun and it was romantic. And it was like, man, all I got to do is buy it and I'm going to make tons of money. And you could do that. You could. And, it was a bummer. A lot of people got caught with a very expensive Airbnb that was not covering itself.
Yeah. And so we self-managed that one. We self-managed the one in Grand Lake, but we hired a manager for the one in Florida. Obviously, none of us live there. That did not go great.
It did not.
And it was pretty much because of the lack of bookings. And we just didn't feel like we were getting the service that we could provide ourselves. And so beginning of this year, we pivoted completely as a whole partnership group after 2 years, and we are self-managing it with somebody boots on the ground, and we are booking way more in revenue. And so being willing also to pivot and change your management strategy, your vendors, the way that you're doing your automations, the way that you're managing communication, whatever that is, I would say you've really got to be flexible right now.
Well, and one key takeaway with the property manager, because there are a lot of really good ones. One thing that we learned that we like them, they offered a pretty good rate, property management fee. But one thing that we didn't realize is that they were adverse to Airbnb and VRBO.
Yes.
They had it on there, but they didn't push it. They didn't try to make it good. They were all about direct bookings, meaning all the bookings came to their website because, they save a lot of money on fees.
Yeah.
But what happens is so many more people shop on Airbnb and VRBO that we were missing all these people. And so not only were the fees stacking up, they were a lower fee, but a lower fee on a lower amount.
Yes.
And so it was like, man, this is not working. And so now we're actually pushing solely all the booking platforms, and it's working so much better. Yeah, that was a good learning.
So if you were asked, would you say short-term rentals are an active business or passive income?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it is the most active business there is when it comes to real estate, residential investing. It is so active, it's not even funny.
Oh yeah. Like how many hours a week on average do you think we spend managing all three when we're managing all three?
Well, you're on call 24/7.
Yeah. So when they can't get in at 2 a.m.
Right. Or they show up late and something's happening and they call you and that is real. But in reality, 5 to 8 hours a week on average.
Yeah.
Just of constant communication and random checking in with the hot tub people and the cleaners and fixing this. That's not including drive time.
Well, and you are in the hospitality industry when you're doing this. And so people have questions. Think about when you go on vacation, you're like, oh my gosh, I want a local recommendation for a coffee shop or a hike. You're literally doing that all the time.
They ask you.
Yes. And you want to provide that, right? You want to start with a bang on this guest experience that they're having. They've just booked your place. They're pumped. They're planning. Yeah. It is a lot of work. I would tell somebody this is not a passive investment. It's not even close.
Well, and I will say the caveat for us is that ours is not a set it and forget it.
That's true.
This is what we do full time. Mm-hmm. And so we pride ourselves on, we are in the top 3% in all of our markets. And our Florida one, the goal is trying to get there. And we are very high level, high touch when it comes to communicating. And
personal.
And not everybody does that. Our last property manager did not do that. But for us, that's how we keep our 5-star review and how we keep our super hosts. All those things matter to us. And so maybe somebody else that doesn't want to do that or doesn't care, they're not going to make as much money.
Yeah.
But it's not as much effort.
But you also, so you bring me to kind of our next point, and then we'll wrap up. This is going to be a short one, but
it's a teaser.
Yes, it's a teaser. You have to provide something different.
You do.
And a value. And so when somebody's shopping online, which is the first place anybody goes to shop for, a vacation, first of all, your pictures have to be absolutely amazing.
No cell phone pictures.
Do not do cell phone pictures.
I don't care.
Gotta have them.
US iPhone. They can't be cell phone. Unless you're a professional iPhone photographer.
But some of those personal things, they are going to set you aside in the market, and they're going to get you really good reviews. I was just looking at some of our reviews this morning and prepping kind of a marketing plan for one of them. But truly, that is how you sometimes live and die by those reviews. And that's sometimes how you get a 5-star instead of a 4.5.
Yep.
And
Really.
so it's extremely active involvement in the business, but in a market that's really shifting right now for short term.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Well, it is also that.
It is.
Let's be real. Let's talk about that. So is it still worth it in 2025 to have an STR?
It absolutely can be worth it.
Okay.
If it's the right property in the right location. There's a lot of things that you have to check to make sure they're right.
And I would say you've got to, if you're shopping right now, you've got to have some really, really good margins or a way to really create an incredible margin, because right now, this is May of 25, we're in a recovery phase for the STR market. 2024 did stabilize a little bit at the end of the year of okay, this might be after a year and a half of decline, we're going to live. But growth has been slow to catch back up. And so it has been challenging. 100%. You have to have a margin, and you have to have a killer location or something that's going to set you aside.
Something unique.
Hot tub.
You got to have a hot tub. I mean, something like that.
Truly.
There's a lot of question marks in this market, whether you just can't go buy something and it's like, this is going to be a killer short term. It might, but where before years ago, you could literally just throw something on the market and it would rent.
Yeah.
Or it's not that anymore.
Not wild.
Yeah, it is not. All right, well, let's wrap this up because
Okay.
the next 2 episodes are going to be super exciting. All right, in the short-term rental space today, what are you yoked to?
I am yoked to a dependable cleaner because
Amen.
I can overcome a garbage cleaning job by throwing some money at the guest or returning their cleaning fee to them, right? If somebody's really awful, I cannot overcome them just not showing up.
Right,
So
especially if it's remote.
Especially if it's remote and you can't run up there to do that. I recommend not going with a solo person. I love supporting solo entrepreneurs. However, if somebody gets sick, if someone's on vacation, you just can't run a business that way. And so I recommend a company and extremely dependable. I think you're yoked to that.
We've seen a couple of those where they pair up.
Yeah.
And it's like 2 or 3 of them, they were solo. And then because of that, they're like, they can scale better.
Yep.
And when they're yoked.
Oh my
somebody else.
gosh.
All right,
What about you?
Right now, it would be 100% location.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it just needs to be a great, like, super awesome location. And that doesn't mean like, oh, it's got a cul-de-sac. Maybe it does in your market, but it means like there's something
Walking
unique
distance.
and like our Grand Lake one, it's on the water. That's why it crushes because it is on the water and it's beautiful. It just needs to be something unique, either whether it's an experience that your location can provide or something, but location is key.
I like that.
All right, cool. So next episode, it's going to be awesome. I'm not even going to give anything away, but she is, I mean, it's a guest, a friend of ours, and she is a rock star.
She's a rock star and she's killing it in Denver in short terms, which is exciting because it's a hard market to do it in.
Well, she's killing it in Denver in short term, and she's acquiring a lot of these via creative finance, which is super cool.
Yes.
So it'll be a great episode. I can't wait for that one. But yeah, where can people find you on the
Instagram? I am at the Ingrid.
You are crushing that. I am at the Travis Hall. As always, thank you for joining and listening. Please be sure to click the like button if there is one. Click the subscribe and follow, just because it helps the algorithm for us. So we appreciate you. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Yoked Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it.
And as always, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow along as we drop a new episode each week.